They dazzled the world. Faces lit by studio lights, names etched into cinema history, worshipped like modern gods. But beneath the glittering surface of Hollywood's golden age and beyond, some stars carried shadows not just from the screen, but from their own bloodlines. Behind the smiles, red carpets, and carefully curated interviews were secrets so personal, so devastating, that they threatened to undo the very myths Hollywood had built around them. Today, we uncover the 24 most shocking family secrets hidden by Hollywood's most iconic stars. Truths so haunting, they'll change the way you see these legends forever. 1. Jack Nicholson, the sister who was his mother. He was the cool rebel of Hollywood, with roles in Chinatown, The Shining, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Jack Nicholson carved a niche as the unpredictable genius of American cinema. Through the 1970s and 80s, he was everywhere. Charming, intense, impossible to ignore. But the man who played fractured minds on screen had a family secret darker than any script. Jack grew up believing his grandmother was his mother. His actual mother, June, posed as his older sister. The truth? She had given birth to Jack at just 17, unmarried and terrified of scandal. The entire family kept the secret from him for over 3 decades. Nicholson only discovered the truth in 1974 when a journalist uncovered it during a Time magazine profile. By then, both his mother and grandmother, his sister and his mother, were already dead. He never had the chance to confront them. Later, he said simply, "I was stunned." It was a pretty dramatic event, but it wasn't what I'd call traumatizing. I'd say it was more fascinating. But those close to him remember something else. The sudden quiet, the distant stare, and a man left questioning his entire identity. Loretta Young, the secret daughter with Clark Gable. In the 1930s and 40s, Loretta Young was the very image of virtue. Poised, radiant, the quintessential American sweetheart. She won an Academy Award, hosted her own primetime TV show, and maintained an image of piety and modesty that studios fiercely protected. But behind the gentle smile was a secret she kept for over 6 decades. She had a child with Clark Gable. At the time, Gable was married. Loretta was unmarried, under contract, and Catholic. A scandal of that magnitude could have ended her career overnight. So the studio crafted a chilling solution. Loretta vanished from public view for several months under the guise of illness, gave birth in secret, and then staged a public adoption of her own biological daughter, Judy Lewis, when the child was nearly 2 years old. Judy grew up never knowing the truth, though her prominent ears and resemblance to Gable sparked endless whispers. The truth came out only after both Gable and Young had died. In her later years, Judy revealed the truth and the trauma of being denied her identity. Loretta never publicly acknowledged the paternity, but in private letters she referred to what happened as date rape, a term that didn't exist when she was 22 and powerless. In one haunting quote, Judy wrote, "I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know it was me, Charlize Theron, the night her mother pulled the trigger." Charlize Theron rose from South African obscurity to become one of Hollywood's most versatile and admired actresses. With an Academy Award for Monster and commanding roles in Mad Max, Fury Road, and Bombshell, she embodied strength, transformation, and cold resolve. But behind the poise and power lies a night soaked in trauma. At just 15 years old, Charlize witnessed her alcoholic father physically attack her and her mother. He had been drinking heavily, as usual. That night, he came home with a loaded gun and threatened to kill them both. Her mother, Gerda, didn't hesitate. She grabbed her own handgun and shot him, dead. No charges were filed. Authorities ruled it self-defense. Charlize rarely spoke of the incident for years. When she did, it was measured, distant. "I only knew him one way, and that was as an abusive man." The media called it a tragedy, but for Charlize, it was survival, a brutal turning point that hardened her spirit and reshaped her understanding of love, fear, and family. She once said in an interview, "You don't have to forgive to move on. You just have to accept what is true." Behind her elegance is a child who grew up in silence, and a woman shaped by the gunshot that saved her life. 4. Eric Clapton, raised by his grandparents, lied to about his mother. To the world, Eric Clapton is a guitar god, a legend whose music defined generations. From Layla to Tears in Heaven, his melodies carried both fire and anguish, but behind the music was a lie he carried into adulthood. Clapton grew up in post-war Surrey, England, believing his grandparents were his parents. His sister, Patricia, was actually his mother, just 16 when she gave birth to him after a brief affair with a Canadian soldier who disappeared soon after. To avoid scandal, the family chose secrecy over honesty. For years, Clapton lived under this deception, feeling unloved and disconnected without knowing why. He didn't discover the truth until age 9, when a cousin blurted it out. From that day, Clapton wrote, he felt like a freak. The emotional rupture never fully healed. Decades later, he spoke about the moment. It changed everything. I lost faith in everything. I didn't trust anyone. That betrayal by the people closest to him sparked years of addiction, depression, and self-destruction, emotions that haunted his career, even at its highest points. The child who was lied to became the man who poured his pain into chords. But beneath every solo was a simple question that never left him. Why wasn't I told the truth? Part 5. Bobby Darin, the star who learned his sister was his mother. In the swinging 60s, Bobby Darin was the golden boy of pop music. With hits like Mac the Knife and Beyond the Sea, he captivated audiences with his charm, swagger, and electric stage presence. He seemed unstoppable, a rising star who could do it all. But in 1968, at the height of his fame, Bobby's world was shattered by a single revelation. The woman he believed was his sister, Nina, was actually his mother. And the woman he had always called Mom was in fact his grandmother. He had been born to a 17-year-old unwed mother in a conservative Italian-American household in the Bronx. To avoid disgrace, the family buried the truth, creating a web of lies that lasted decades. Bobby discovered the secret in his early 30s, just as his health, already compromised by rheumatic fever as a child, was beginning to fail. The betrayal devastated him. He withdrew from the industry, vanished from public life, and never emotionally recovered. He once told a close friend, "If I'm not who I think I am, then who the hell am I?" That question haunted him until his premature death at 37 during heart surgery. The boy with the golden voice died not only of illness, but of a truth delivered too late. 6. Judy Garland, a childhood bought and broken. Judy Garland was Hollywood's shimmering ingenue, the girl who sang Over the Rainbow and stole America's heart as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. But that same little girl, with twinkling eyes and boundless talent, was never truly free. Her life, from the very beginning, was manufactured. Born Frances Ethel Gum, Judy was pushed into vaudeville by her mother, Ethel, who many described as controlling, ambitious, and cruel. By the time Judy was 10, studio executives had taken over, feeding her pills to sleep, pills to wake, pills to perform. Her body was commodified, her hunger suppressed, her spirit dimmed. But perhaps the darkest betrayal came from home. Judy often referred to her mother as the real Wicked Witch of the West. It wasn't just the drugs or the pressure, it was the sense that her mother loved the fame more than the daughter. Her adulthood was plagued by addiction, breakdowns, and financial ruin. She married 5 times, searching endlessly for the love she never received as a child. She died alone in a London bathroom in 1969, just 47 years old, her body so used and so broken that it could no longer go on. Liza Minnelli, her daughter, once said, "My mother was a victim of her own legend." But long before the legend, she was just a little girl begging to be loved by a mother who never truly saw her. 7. Angelina Jolie. A daughter torn from her father's shadow, she became one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. Oscar winner, humanitarian, Hollywood royalty. But long before Angelina Jolie was a global icon, she was a girl navigating the wreckage of a fractured family and a war with her own father. Angelina was born to actors Jon Voight and Marceline Bertrand. When she was barely a toddler, Voight walked out, leaving Marceline to raise their children alone. Angelina never forgave him. Throughout her youth, she viewed him not as a father, but as an absence. Their relationship was marked by long silences, bitter reunions, and public clashes. In 2002, Angelina legally removed Voight from her name. The final blow came when Voight accused her in the press of having serious mental problems. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was generational. Jolie had spent years burying childhood wounds under tattoos, dangerous relationships, and self-harm. Her father's public judgment reopened every scar. Despite their genetic link, Jolie often said she inherited nothing from him, except the pain. "My father and I don't speak," she once declared. You can't force someone into a father role if they're not willing to be one. In time, she built her own family, on her own terms. But behind every red carpet photo with her children is a woman who learned to mother by surviving the failure of her own father. 8. Christina Crawford, the daughter who exposed a legend. Joan Crawford was a titan of classic Hollywood, glamorous, commanding, a queen of the silver screen. But behind her perfectly sculpted eyebrows and icy presence, a dark secret festered inside the home she kept under lock and key. Christina Crawford, Joan's adopted daughter, lived that secret. To the public, she was the lucky child plucked from obscurity and gifted a life of privilege. But behind closed doors, she endured emotional abuse, manipulation, and violence. Joan, obsessed with control and appearances, reportedly beat her with wire hangers, forced her to scrub the floors on her knees, and withheld food as punishment. In 1978, after Joan's death, Christina shattered Hollywood's illusion with her explosive memoir, Mommy Dearest. The book painted her adoptive mother not as a star, but as a tyrant. It horrified audiences and enraged Joan's defenders, yet it struck a nerve with many who had idolized the actress without ever knowing the woman. Christina's siblings denied the allegations, but she never wavered. "I wrote the book because I had to get the truth out," she said. "No child should have to live with that kind of fear." The legacy of Joan Crawford now stands forever split between the actress on the screen and the mother behind the door. 9. Woody Harrelson, the father who killed for hire. With his laid-back charm and unconventional roles, Woody Harrelson has become one of Hollywood's most unpredictable stars. From natural-born killers to True Detective, he's portrayed violence, madness, and moral decay with eerie authenticity. But part of that darkness came from somewhere deeply real, his own father. Woody's father, Charles Harrelson, wasn't just absent. He was a convicted hitman. In 1979, he was sentenced to 2 life terms for assassinating a federal judge, an act so rare it shocked the nation. But before that, Charles had already served time for murder and had rumored ties to organized crime. For much of Woody's youth, the truth was hidden or obscured. He was 7 when Charles walked out, and for years he was told little about the man. When he finally learned the extent of his father's crimes, he was devastated and obsessed. Woody tried to visit him in prison, funded legal appeals, and even explored conspiracy theories that linked his father to JFK's assassination. Though they reconnected sporadically before Charles's death in 2007, Woody always carried the tension of that bloodline. "It's a twisted situation," he once admitted. "I don't know what it says about me. But he was my father." For a man who plays haunted characters with uncanny ease, it's no act. The shadow was real, and it bore his last name. Tax 10. Marilyn Monroe, the forgotten girl with no father and a mother lost to madness. To the world, Marilyn Monroe was the embodiment of glamour. Platinum hair, red lips, a walk that mesmerized millions. But beneath the icon was Norma Jean Mortensen, a fragile girl born into chaos, longing for a family she never truly had. She never knew her father. His identity was a mystery wrapped in whispers and studio rumors. Her mother, Gladys, battled severe mental illness and was eventually institutionalized. As a child, Marilyn was passed from one foster home to another, sometimes abused, often neglected. At times, she lived in orphanages, clinging to a fantasy of being rescued. She once wrote in her diary, "I was never used to being happy, so that wasn't something I ever took for granted." As her fame grew, Marilyn searched desperately for love, acceptance, and stability. Through fame, through marriage, through sex, and through pills. But no spotlight could illuminate the darkness planted in her childhood. She died alone in her Los Angeles home in 1962 at just 36 years old, with barbiturates in her blood and conspiracy theories swirling. But at its core, her death wasn't a mystery. It was the quiet collapse of a girl who never found a safe place to land. She became a legend, yes. But she died still searching for the mother who disappeared and the father who never came. 11. Jean Harlow, the blonde bombshell with a mother's grip of steel. Before Marilyn, there was Jean Harlow, the original platinum blonde whose electrifying presence lit up 1930s Hollywood. She was daring, magnetic, and irresistible on screen. But off-screen, she was under the suffocating control of a woman who called herself Mother Jean, a mother who treated her daughter more like a project than a person. Jean was born Harlean Carpenter, and her mother, a failed actress, was determined to live vicariously through her. From childhood, Jean was dressed, posed, and presented like a doll. Mother Jean controlled every part of her life, from contracts to clothes to who she dated. She refused to let Jean even speak to reporters alone. When Jean's second husband took his own life just weeks after their wedding, it sent her into a spiral. But her mother refused to let her grieve. Instead, she pushed Jean back into work, pretending everything was fine. The truth was never allowed to interfere with the image. At 26, Jean suddenly fell ill, kidney failure. As her condition worsened, her mother rejected hospital treatment and insisted on home remedies. Jean died within days, her body bloated and in agony. At her funeral, Mother Jean posed for the cameras, dressed in black lace. A friend later said, "She didn't lose a daughter. She lost her product." 12. Clark Gable, the king who denied his own daughter. He was known as the King of Hollywood, rugged, masculine, untouchable. With his iconic role in Gone with the Wind and a persona that blended grit with irresistible charm, Clark Gable became the epitome of the American leading man. But behind that chiseled image lay a cowardice few ever dared to mention. In 1935, Gable had an affair with actress Loretta Young during the filming of The Call of the Wild. She became pregnant. For Gable, who was married and contractually bound by a ruthless studio system, the solution was silence. He never acknowledged the child, never offered support, never even visited. Their daughter, Judy Lewis, was raised in secrecy. Loretta hid her away for months after birth, later adopting her publicly to conceal the scandal. Judy only discovered the truth as an adult, through her uncanny resemblance to Gable and quiet whispers from Hollywood insiders. Even when confronted with the truth, Gable stayed silent until his death. He never claimed her. Judy said later, "I spent a lifetime looking for his face in a crowd." She didn't want his money. She wanted his name, his voice, his love. But the king of Hollywood couldn't risk a crack in his crown. 13. Charlie Chaplin, the children he denied, and the paternity scandal that nearly destroyed him. Charlie Chaplin was more than a silent film star. He was a global symbol. With The Tramp, he made the world laugh during its darkest hours. But off-screen, Chaplin's personal life was anything but comic. In fact, it was filled with scandal, secrecy, and courtroom warfare. In the 1940s, Chaplin became embroiled in a vicious paternity suit with actress Joan Barry. She claimed he was the father of her child. Chaplin denied it, and blood tests supported him. But due to a loophole in California law at the time, which rejected blood tests as conclusive evidence, the jury ruled that he was the legal father regardless. Chaplin was forced to pay child support for a daughter he insisted wasn't his. The press savaged him. The scandal led to FBI surveillance, political pressure, and ultimately his exile from the United States in 1952. It wasn't his only family secret. Over his life, he fathered 11 children with multiple women, some decades younger than he was. The public saw him as a comic genius. His children saw a distant, conflicted man burdened by paranoia and pride. Chaplin once said, "A man's true character comes out when he's drunk." But for Chaplin, it may have also surfaced when facing a child he refused to call his own. At 14, Joan Crawford, the star who controlled everything except her own past. Joan Crawford spent her entire career crafting perfection. Her face, her wardrobe, her performances, all sharp angles and steely control. She climbed from poverty to stardom, from dancer to Oscar winner, fighting for every inch of her place in Hollywood. But the family secret that haunted her wasn't just about power. It was about origin. Born Lucille Fay LeSueur, Crawford grew up in grinding poverty in Texas and Oklahoma. Her father abandoned the family before she was born. Her mother remarried a man who was rumored to have abused young Lucille. But the details of her early life remained suspiciously vague. Crawford herself often changed them. Dates didn't line up. Her real birth year was debated. She even had her studio change her name through a fan contest, burying Lucille permanently. As she rose in fame, she erased her past, rewriting herself as a symbol of American ambition. She adopted 4 children, but kept their lives strictly regulated, curated for the public eye. Behind closed doors, there were whispered accounts of cruelty, emotional manipulation, and eerie demands for order. When her daughter Christina exposed it all in Mommy Dearest, the mask cracked forever. But perhaps the greatest tragedy wasn't what Crawford did, but what had once been done to her. In burying her past, she buried the frightened girl who never truly escaped. A studio executive once remarked, Joan created herself out of pain, like a sculpture chiseled from a scream. 15. Charlie Sheen, the fallout of a father's fame and a son's fury. He was once the highest-paid actor on television, the brash, smirking anti-hero of Two and a Half Men. Charlie Sheen lived in excess, sex, drugs, notoriety, and made headlines faster than his scripts could be written. But long before the chaos, there was a boy raised under a different kind of pressure, the shadow of a famous father. Charlie was born Carlos Irwin Estevez, son of beloved actor Martin Sheen. At home, the image was different from the red carpet. Martin battled alcoholism, suffered a heart attack while filming Apocalypse Now, and often disappeared into his roles and his demons. Charlie grew up watching both adoration and self-destruction play out in real time. He idolized his father and also rebelled against him. Charlie dropped out of school, changed his name to escape the legacy, and carved his own brutal path. Addiction followed. Arrests, public breakdowns, HIV diagnosis, and a media circus that turned him into a cautionary tale. In interviews, Martin once admitted he was powerless to stop his son's descent. You try to help, but there's only so much a parent can do. The pain was mutual. Charlie blamed his upbringing, his pressure to perform, his search for identity under someone else's last name. Beneath the mania was a child trying to scream loud enough to be heard over the echoes of a father's applause. 16. Drew Barrymore, Hollywood's littlest addict. She was America's darling at just 7 years old, melting hearts as Gertie in E.T. But Drew Barrymore's real life was far darker than any Spielberg alien fantasy. By the time she was 9, she was drinking. At 10, she was smoking weed. By 12, she was snorting cocaine, all under the indifferent eyes of the very people who should have protected her. Born into the famous Barrymore acting dynasty, Drew inherited a legacy of fame and dysfunction. Her father, John Drew Barrymore, was a violent alcoholic who disappeared from her life. Her mother, Jade, thrust her into nightclubs instead of classrooms, accompanying her to Studio 54 and the Viper Room like a twisted chaperone. By 13, Drew had been institutionalized. She attempted suicide. Her career collapsed as fast as it had risen. Eventually, she emancipated herself from her parents, legally separating from her mother and choosing to raise herself. She would later describe her childhood not as privileged, but as perilous. When you're that young and that famous, nobody tells you no, and that's the most dangerous thing of all. Drew made a remarkable comeback, but behind the bubbly personality is a survivor of addiction, of neglect, and of a mother who wanted a celebrity more than a daughter. 17. Anthony Perkins, a life shaped by secrets and silence. To audiences, Anthony Perkins was forever Norman Bates, the polite, nervous boy with a murderous secret in Psycho. But the role wasn't just acting. Perkins understood what it meant to live with something you could never say aloud. Born in 1932, Perkins lost his father, stage actor Osgood Perkins, at just 5 years old. His childhood was marked by loneliness, intense shyness, and a growing sense that he was different. In a rigid, homophobic Hollywood, that difference had a name. He was gay. Perkins spent most of his adult life hiding his sexuality. He engaged in secret relationships with men, including a rumored affair with Tab Hunter, another closeted star. But the pressure to conform to survive was overwhelming. In 1973, he married photographer Barry Berenson, reportedly at the urging of his publicist. They had 2 children. Even those close to him described a life of constant duality, warm and gentle one moment, frozen and evasive the next. He avoided discussing his past, his truth, even his fear. In 1992, he died of AIDS-related pneumonia, having kept his diagnosis hidden from the public. His wife never left his side. 9 years later, she died on 9/11, aboard one of the hijacked planes. Anthony Perkins once said, "I've learned that secrecy is corrosive. It eats you alive." 18. Tatum O'Neal, the Oscar winner who lost her childhood at just 10 years old. Tatum O'Neal became the youngest person ever to win an Academy Award for her heartbreaking performance in Paper Moon alongside her real-life father, Ryan O'Neal. But behind that golden statue was a home drenched in pain, neglect, and betrayal. Tatum's parents, Ryan O'Neal and actress Joanna Moore, were both consumed by addiction. Her mother descended into drug and alcohol abuse, leaving Tatum to raise herself and care for her younger brother. But her father, the man the world saw as her mentor and co-star, was no savior. According to Tatum, he was emotionally abusive, jealous, and sometimes violent. She claims he hit on her friends, mocked her weight, and abandoned her when she most needed him. At 16, Tatum turned to heroin and spiraled into years of addiction. Despite periods of recovery and reconciliation, the damage remained. Their relationship became tabloid fodder, especially after her memoir, A Paper Life, detailed their turbulent dynamic. Ryan denied much of it, but the silence between them often spoke louder than any headline. Tatum later reflected, "I never had a childhood. I had a career, a spotlight, and a father who treated me like competition." Her Oscar wasn't a crown, it was a curse, one she never asked for, and one that could never fill the void her father left behind. Natalie Wood, the actress who feared water and drowned in silence. Natalie Wood was luminous, delicate, unforgettable. From Rebel Without a Cause to West Side Story, she was Hollywood's favorite porcelain doll. But behind the wide brown eyes and fragile grace was a lifetime of fear, especially of water. As a child, her mother, controlling and deeply superstitious, once took her to a fortune teller. The psychic warned, "Your daughter will die in dark water." From that day on, Natalie developed a crippling fear of drowning. It wasn't just a phobia. It was prophecy embedded into her bones. Her personal life was turbulent. She married actor Robert Wagner twice. Their relationship was passionate, possessive, and complicated. On the night of November 29th, 1981, Natalie, Wagner, and actor Christopher Walken were on a yacht off Catalina Island. She disappeared. Hours later, her body was found floating in the water, dressed in a nightgown, socks, and a down jacket. The initial ruling was accidental drowning. But questions swirled. Bruises, conflicting testimonies, Wagner's delayed call for help. Natalie was terrified of water, yet she supposedly tried to board a dinghy alone in the dark? The case was reopened decades later. In 2011, the coroner changed the cause of death to drowning and other undetermined factors. In 2018, Wagner was named a person of interest. He has never been charged. Natalie Wood's sister once said, "Natalie didn't drown. She was silenced. Whether by accident, fate, or something darker, the water took her, just as her mother always feared." 22. Frances Farmer, the starlet who was locked away and forgotten. Frances Farmer was once poised to become one of Hollywood's brightest stars. With her haunting beauty and raw talent, she lit up films like Come and Get It and Rhythm on the Range. But Frances had something Hollywood feared: defiance. She spoke her mind, rejected the studio machine, and refused to conform. For that, she was punished, brutally. As her clashes with studio heads intensified, so did rumors about her mental health. In 1943, after a series of public outbursts and a controversial DUI arrest, Frances was institutionalized against her will. What followed was nearly a decade of horror: electroshock therapy, isolation, physical abuse, and, according to some accounts, rape at the hands of hospital staff. Her family consented to the treatment. Her mother took control of her finances and decisions, later becoming her legal guardian. Frances, once a luminous presence, became a ghost trapped inside a system that crushed nonconformity. She was eventually released, broken but breathing. She returned to the public eye briefly in the late 1950s, hosting a local TV show in Indianapolis. But she never escaped the scars. Frances once said, "I have never been sane. I have never been crazy. I've only ever been lost." Hollywood didn't just abandon her. It devoured her spirit and discarded the remains. In a town that worships beauty, her greatest crime was refusing to be obedient. 23. Macaulay Culkin, the child star who had to divorce his parents. In the early 90s, Macaulay Culkin was the most famous child on the planet. Home Alone made him a global icon before he hit puberty. But while millions of kids wished they could trade places with him, few knew the truth. Macaulay's greatest fear wasn't burglars. It was his own family. Behind the scenes, his father, Kit Culkin, was domineering and ruthless. A failed actor himself, Kit used his son's fame as his second chance. He managed Macaulay's career with an iron grip, controlling his every move, pushing him into back-to-back films, and treating his childhood like a business. As Macaulay's fortune grew, so did the war between his parents. culminating in a bitter custody and financial battle when they separated. At just 15, Macaulay took the unthinkable step. He filed to remove both parents from access to his $17 million trust fund. In essence, he divorced them. He left Hollywood soon after, disappearing from the spotlight and refusing interviews for years. People speculated. They whispered about drugs, about trauma. But Macaulay, always careful, later said, "I'm not broken. I just got out." He survived something most child stars don't: the machine, the fame, and most of all, the people who were supposed to love him. 24. Cary Grant, the leading man with a hidden past and altered mind. Cary Grant was the epitome of elegance. Suave, debonair, impossibly charming, he was the man every man wanted to be and every woman wanted to love. But the man-born Archibald Leach carried secrets so personal, so complex, they were buried beneath decades of carefully crafted image. He was born into poverty in Bristol, England. When he was 11, his mother vanished. His father told him she had died. It wasn't until Grant was in his 30s, by then a famous movie star, that he discovered the truth. His mother was alive, locked away in a mental institution for decades, abandoned and erased. The betrayal ran deep. Grant never forgave his father, and the revelation sent him into a spiral of emotional confusion and identity crisis. He became obsessed with transformation, not just on screen, but within himself. In the 1950s and 60s, he began taking LSD, not recreationally, but therapeutically, under medical supervision. Through more than 100 sessions, Grant said the drug helped him face the buried trauma of his childhood. "I learned that everything is or becomes its opposite," he once told an interviewer. "It released me from all the tensions and traumas of my life." He built a new life, a calm one, in his later years. But the child who lost his mother never fully disappeared. He only changed his name, his face, and his accent until no one, not even himself, could recognize the pain beneath the polish.